This week on A Relatable Journey, we have head coach Kurt Hines. If you are anywhere on Instagram or Twitter, mainly on Twitter, you know who this man is. High school football coach out in the state of California. He is extremely motivational and does not shy away from his faith and the struggles that he has had in his family life. This episode of A Relatable Journey is a lot of fun, especially if you have anybody in the football world or in sports in the high school level. This is an episode you want to listen to.
But I think, especially in today's day and age, now more than ever, people are looking and searching for something. I don't try to sprinkle in my faith when it's convenient or it sounds good. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher as far back as I can remember, and school was not easy for me. So the hardest thing I ever went through was a tragedy of a child. Yeah, and without my faith, I had no idea how I would have made it through that. My number one purpose in coaching and teaching in life is to bless and empower as many people as I can.
Man, thanks again, dude, for doing this. It does mean a lot. And I followed your stuff for a while. And I'll be honest, I bet you some people probably feel this way or told you they were skeptical, maybe at first, of a high school coach that had so many followers and was maybe like, why? And then, the more I followed, I think I appreciated what you were doing. Do you get that a lot?
You know what's funny? First of all, I appreciate that. I do, honestly. I just recently I was reading something in a book about imposter syndrome. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm. I just recently heard about it.
And I've been struggling with that a little bit, to be very transparent with you a little bit lately, because I know who I am. I take pride in the fact that I know who I am and I know whose I am. And I am a son of God. I am a Christian first and foremost. But I look at it, I'm like, I am a Division IV. In San Diego goes the Open Division, which is like the big boys, the biggest schools like Helix and Cathedral and, Mater Dei. Down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're a Division IV program, and I love us. I love what we do. I love our young men and our young women. I've had success coaching on the East Coast and West Coast, but I'm not. Yeah, still I struggle with that sometimes because I'm like, who am I? And when I get asked to speak at certain places, are you familiar with Wayne Dyer?
No.
So he passed away a few years ago. I think at the age of 84. Had written many books on self-help and kind of I'm sure he never used the word guru, but a guru in that field. But he had written something years ago about ego, and it really was a paradigm shift for me. For me personally, I always thought ego was that cocky, arrogant coach or player that just thought they were better than others. But the way he phrased it, he said, ego is anytime we EGO, edge God out. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
And I do that way too often, and I'm paraphrasing, but he went on to say pretty much, if God has opened a door for you or put something in your heart, who are you to question what God does? And I still, like I said, I wish I could say I'm over it. I'm getting better, but I still struggle sometimes with, I'm not this guy. I don't have that life-changing story. I don't coach in the collegiate or professional level. And I don't care to. I don't, it's not a goal of mine, But I have more and more as I've kind of just let go and trusted God, said, all right, if someone reaches out, then there's a reason for it. And if there's one audience member literally in that audience or from a podcast that can take away something and become a better Christian or husband, father, coach, or teacher, then I've got to trust God and just go with it. So it's humbling, but I'm embracing it a little bit more and more.
So where does your imposter syndrome feeling come from? Because typically, from what I've read and what I've seen and watched, is that somebody feels like they are somewhere where they don't belong. And it doesn't sound like that comes with you when it comes to coaching, but it does maybe on the stage, like, hey, I'm only a Division IV high school football coach. Is that what you're saying? But you've created this kind of for yourself with the social media as well. And God's given you that platform.
Yeah, great question. Sometimes I'll do a podcast or whatever, and then someone else will go to share it, and they'll use words that I cringe at, like the most motivational coach. I'm like, man, so many coaches must hate me simply because of what other people say about me. And I know I reach people. I know I have a certain connection, and I'm talking about my players and their families and the people that know me day in and day out. One of the best compliments I ever received from a player was, and I didn't even know he said it until it aired, was a few years back, a local news station came out to one of our practices and did a little segment on my social media and whatnot. And they said, hey, can we talk to any players? So I grabbed 2 or 3, said, guys, we get a chance to go see so-and-so. And one of our quarterbacks, at the time, a starting quarterback, said something like, he said, what you see in social media is what we see in Coach Hines every day. And that meant the world to me, because I don't feel like I'm an imposter where I'm pretending to be something I'm not. And I don't feel like I don't belong. I know I belong in the coaching world and the teaching world. I am beginning more and more to believe that I belong in the, I don't even know what to call the world.
The
Self-help.
Instagram, the social media world.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
But I think that's a reasonable feeling, because it's curated. Like, we question ourselves, or at least I do sometimes. Like, I only put things out there I want people to see.
Yes.
Like, I don't put the worst out there. Now, there are sometimes I'll put a post out like where I want to be open and honest, but it's very intentional. Even that is curated. So I think that's a natural feeling of, like, because you have parents watching you too, and you have parents that are like, this guy is in charge of my kids. Do I want an Instagram famous coach? Like, is he a real coach? Is he a good coach? And I think that's probably a reasonable question, because how much are we curating our life? How much are we, changing what our life really is because of social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, very well said. And I think one of the things, and you just touched on it, and I actually did a little video a few days ago. I was sitting in the car. My wife ran to the store for a second to grab something. And I talked about something about, how people will celebrate through our, how did I say it? Through our triumphs. They'll celebrate through our triumphs, but they connect through our
Tribulations.
Trials, exactly.
100%.
And I thought that, I'm like, man, I need to, but it is something not with a negative. There's no agenda there, but I do need to post more of the days I do struggle and things like that. But then it is still something premeditated where I'm going to share this. I don't think that's bad, though. I think more people need to see more transparency and say, hey, today I'm struggling. Today I'm just having a hard time, or whatever it is. And
I think that's like, it's almost an entirely different conversation. And I've had this conversation with John Christ on this podcast as well. And we talked about, like, how many people put something out there like, I'm struggling, so that they can get 300 likes before they go to bed. So it's like a fake, not that it's not a fake I'm struggling, but it's fake. You're fake healing, if you will. You're not actually doing anything really about it either,
Right. What's the intention behind it? I will tell you, I've gotten a lot better at that, and I'm not proud of this. But years ago, when I first got on Twitter, because that's really where my kind of platform has exploded. And that was pushed on me by my wife. She's like, just get on Twitter, because I was always asking her about scores of local high school games back in New Hampshire before we moved, just to find out the standings. And she said, get on Twitter and follow these guys. They report all the games. And that's what happened. But I used to have a thought to come to my heart and be like, oh, I want to share this. And then I would spend, gosh, I don't know, Will, 2 minutes, 5 minutes thinking, will this get retweets? Will it get likes? And I hate admitting that.
Right? But it's real.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I posted a video the other day on Twitter. I don't even know who the pastor was or who the speaker was speaking, but I was scrolling through TikTok. And it talked about God challenging us. And if Jesus went through this, if Jesus went through all these different things, don't you think God would have us do it also? And the whole context was, God cares more about our character than our comfort. And I loved it. So I was, and I'm embarrassed to even say this, I was proud of myself, because I didn't even think, will other people like this? I was like, man, this spoke to me. Let me just share the audio of this with me. I literally sat there holding the phone to myself and just kind of looking at the camera as this guy was speaking. And I was like, I don't care if it gets a single like or retweet. It just means something to me that I can go back to a week from now or a month from now. And I'm getting a good number of a good amount of interaction. And I love that, because it just, once again, what is social media? For me, it's a platform, just like coaching is, to share what we're passionate about, to share our love for Christ, to share our love for empowering others. And it's an interesting world we live in. So
I'm fascinated with you living in California, having a strong faith, and working for the school system. Are you in public or private sector?
Yes and yes. So I teach at a private Christian school.
Okay. So you're allowed to, wear your faith on your sleeve, and that's allowed to be part of you. Is that right?
Well, where I teach, it's not only allowed, but it's encouraged. It's just, yeah. I love everything about where I teach fourth grade. I've always taught kindergarten through first grade through fourth grade, regular ed. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always taught kindergarten through fourth grade, regular ed. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13th grade. I've always coached at 11th grade, 12th grade, 13 the high school level for 25 or 26 years now. Where I currently coach in Coronado, it's a public school. So we are not allowed to pray with our team. We are not allowed to have, those big group meetings, but I pray with my players a lot. And I've shared it openly. And I know my athletic director and the principal and others follow me on social media. And I've often said, I don't ever want to lose my job because of my faith, but I'm willing to if it need be. And just so often when I meet with players that are struggling with something in my coach's office, or when I meet with the players and their parents, I will often ask them, say, do you believe in God? And if they say yes, then I'll ask them, I said, do you mind if we pray? If it's on my heart to pray. And 9 out of 10 times they say yes. I have had about 4 or 5 instances just in my time out here in California where I've asked parents that, or players, and they said, no, we don't. And I said, all right, great. And I just continued the conversation just a little bit different direction. And every time they've stopped me and said, well, what have we said we did? And I just tell them, I said, well, I would ask if you would mind if we would pray. And two or three times they said, would you pray for us? And I love that. And I'm not trying to bait anyone or try to sneak in my faith. But I think, especially in today's day and age, now more than ever, people are looking and searching for something. And I think what they're missing is they should be looking and searching for him, for Christ, and they just don't know it yet.
Have you ever led a high school athlete to Jesus?
Yeah, several times. And one of the greatest, I shouldn't say greatest stories, that sounds arrogant. One of the greatest memories of mine.
One of the greatest things I've ever done.
Right? Hold the presses. Everyone stop what you're doing. This is really important. I had a player back in New Hampshire where a lineman, we were at an away game. We had won the game, but that's irrelevant. Walking off the field, he had injured his knee. So he and his father were walking, kind of hobbling with me off the field. And his father said, well, Coach, what do we do about Matt's knee? I said, well, he's going to see Eric, our trainer, tomorrow. We'll take care of that. Make sure you ice it tonight. And kind of took them through that. I said, I'll pray for you. I said, no, let's pray for healing or whatever I said. And they both were walking off the field. They both literally stopped. I looked over to my left and they were not happy at all. And the father said, Coach, we're atheists. And me being just the fool that I am, I said, well, I'll pray for you. Smiled. They didn't smile. I thought, all right, I'm going to get an email to the athletic director or whatever, and this might cause a problem. Didn't hear back from them as far as that. It was a senior year. We had finished the season, no issues. 2 years later, I get an email, like a War and Peace length email from the father saying, I forget his wife's name, and I shouldn't even say it, but my wife and I just went through a divorce, last year, and I remember something you said in the field walking out with Matt and I would love to join you to go to church someday. And I was like, whoa, and I literally just get chill saying this now.
That's incredible.
And he ended up joining, getting baptized, joining the church. And I don't think I know I didn't do anything special, but I was comfortable enough, bold enough just to plant a seed, just to share my faith in the slightest way. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we don't know, God does miracles still to this day. And I think a lot of people think the miracles are in biblical times, and he works miracles daily. And who are we to judge where and when we should say something? Now, I don't ever want to impose my faith on someone and force it on someone. And I don't think Christ wants us to do that either, but we do need to be bold in sharing who we are. And I've always said this, and I've heard this before. I don't think this is not my own. I must have read it somewhere, but I'm not a coach that happens to be a Christian. I am a Christian that happens to be a coach. And there's a big difference for me. I don't try to sprinkle in my faith when it's convenient or it sounds good. It's just, this is who I am in all I do. And I happen to be a football coach and a teacher. So let's see how we can marry those 3 things together and change some lives.
And I've said this before on a Relatable Journey, and I never say who it is because I know then I'll get just people will be infuriated. But there's politicians out there that say I'm either a Catholic or non-denominational, whatever it is, but I don't bring that in when I vote. I don't bring that with me to work. So like I'm non-partisan. It's like, well, I don't think that's how this works. I don't think Jesus stays outside of Congress. I don't think Jesus stays outside of the Senate or outside of the White House, who's ever in there, doesn't matter. So when you say that, like, yeah, you can't be a coach and be a Christian. It's like, all right, God, I'll see you later. Like we'll catch up tonight. I mean, he comes with you everywhere. And when he does come with you everywhere, I think you're a lot more at peace with who you are, what you can do, and how you can impact others. And back to that story, I was just finishing, it had to be Matthew, where it's like, if you are a believer in me, don't you let your light shine on top, not beside of a bowl. And
Yes.
I screw it up, and people are gonna be like, "You even know what you're talking about?"
A candle on a hill. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when I was working in Wichita years and years ago, there was an opportunity. I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember the exact feeling of I had an opportunity to share my faith, and I cowered away from it. I was just nervous of how people were going to react to it. And I remember coming back home that night being like, that was so weak. Like that was pathetic. And I vowed to myself, I will never, ever do that again. And I'm sure I have time and time again, but more times than not, I make a cognizant effort to not use the truth as a hammer, because that's not what it's supposed to be. Otherwise, you're banging cymbals, as the Bible says, and no one wants to hear that. But you want to share it in love, and when there's an opportunity. So I think the way you did it is like the perfect way. You weren't, no, you need to pray for his knee. It's nothing's going to get through to him in that head. But you planted that seed, and I think that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. I think that's how we are supposed to do it. But I also think it's a lot harder than you may think it is, or I may think it is today, because 5 years ago it was very difficult for me. And I'm sure maybe at a point for you, it may have been difficult to talk about your faith.
Yeah, it's interesting. Two thoughts came to mind. One was, when you talked about the politicians, and I'm not going to get political either, but at the same time, I think way too many of us treat God like a part-time employer, but we want full-time benefits.
It's like our co-pilot. It's like, chime in when I ask. Like,
exactly. And as far as the offending someone, my gosh, I can't. I'm pausing because I'm sure our parents said this and our grandparents said this, but I truly believe there's probably never been a time in history when people have been more sensitive, because the world we live in today, I can say the sky is blue, and that's going to offend someone because whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking to offend people with my faith, but man, if we're going to offend someone, let it be something that we know deep down in our hearts can change their lives forever for the better.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what being part of God's family is about. It's like being what a responsible parent is like, or a teacher or coach is. Sometimes things need to be said, and not in a hurtful way, but that is for their betterment, and that it's going to help them. And it's not up for you, actually, in this case, to make that happen. There is a Rick Warren devotional that sticks with me forever and always, is that I don't have to be God's lawyer. I just have to be God's witness. So just get up there and tell my story. I don't have to defend God. Like, he's going to be just fine doing that himself. Just be the witness. Like, hey, this is what God's done in my life. This is what happened when I prayed for a home. This is what happened when, oddly enough, my wife and I prayed for a sectional, because they're so exorbitantly expensive right now. We found one that cost the exact perfect amount for us, and we were able to afford one. Like, if you pray about, those are my testimonies. We prayed for a down payment for the house, and it happened. Like, we were able to do it. And that's the only way we got a house in this market, and I try to share those moments as a witness, not as I'm telling you there's a God. I'm just, what do you think? Like, I don't know. Like, if you're having trouble buying a house, try a prayer. I don't know.
Amen. I got chills when you said that also, because I just saw a video yesterday, and someone, I didn't know it was originally from Rick Warren, so someone else shared it and didn't give credit to Rick Warren, but I love the analogy. It's powerful.
How did you get into coaching? Let's start with kind of your background in that way. Let's go all the way back. Like, because me, I got into talking about sports because my talent level just kind of dropped off at one point. I was like, well, I guess I can talk about it.
Yeah. For me, it was as soon as I found out my modeling career wasn't going to take off. I'm just kidding.
Must have been a week ago.
Right. Yeah. Right now, it was age 4, I think, a little fat little kid. I was a junior in college. And one of my professors, I was going to school for elementary education, and she knew I had a passion for children with special needs, and she had approached me and said, there's a middle school up the road that's looking for coaches for a special needs flag football team. So I said, absolutely, would love to do it. Got one of my teammates from college to join me. And it's a moment I'll never forget, where the first practice we had, I was standing on a football field, a little grass field. It wasn't even a football field. Lines weren't even painted, but I was standing on a field, and there was this girl with Down syndrome, probably 4 yards away from me, not even 5 yards, and had a little children's football and tossed it to her underhand. Now let me stop there for a second. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher as far back as I can remember, and school was not easy for me. That's a whole nother discussion at another time. And I always loved football, but never thought about, hey, I want to coach. When I was tossing the ball to this young woman, I think she was 6th or 7th grade, she dropped it like 4 times in a row. picked it up every time with a smile. The fifth or sixth time, whatever it was that she caught it, her eyes lit up, her whole world lit up. And I remember the feeling I had was, oh, I want to do this. Like I want to be able to just, it's teaching on a field. It's the exact same thing. Great coaches are great teachers, and great teachers are great coaches. So what happened? That was my first experience, just as a volunteer. We weren't getting.
Did
paid
you have
for
a
it.
faith at that point?
Oh yeah. So I was very fortunate. My parents raised me. I was raised Catholic, but I always had a strong faith. My wife and I are now, I consider myself Christian. We go to a non-denominational Christian church. My faith is everything to me. I've always had a testimony of Christ, and prayer for me has always been my rock. Like I joke about it, but God must put me on mute sometimes, not because he doesn't answer my prayers, but I reach out to him. My wife and I pray every morning together and every night. We have for 28 plus years. And then I'll get in the shower and I have worship music on, and I'm praying as I'm showering. I'm driving in the truck and I'm constantly praying. So even then though, I went to church as a youth growing up in high school because I had to. If you want to go out, Friday and Saturday night, you're going to church on Sunday. So I went, but I still had a testimony of Christ. Went to college and I was like, whoa, there's no consequence anymore. I don't have to go to church anymore. And stopped going for the first year when I was in college, and didn't really have a big altering, like earth-shattering change in my life. But I knew something was missing a little bit. And then I started to get into some real big trouble with, I was always, I always loved people, but growing up from 7th grade, not proud of it, through 22, I drank a ton and I fought a ton. I loved to fight. It was a rush for me.
I think all of us have had a bit of that in us at one point or another.
Yeah. And I had, just before my wife and I got married, I remember having a dream or a nightmare. It's really, in hindsight, a blessing of a dream where I pictured myself, my wife and I, we have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son, 2 grandsons. At the time, my wife was never married before, but she had a child through another relationship. So Hallie, our oldest daughter, was a year and a half when I met her. So when we were dating, we had a child. We got married after a year or so of dating. And I had this dream where I was walking downstairs and my wife was apologizing and we only had Hallie, but our children. So I already saw in my mind, it wasn't a vision, but a group of children. And she was apologizing to them for dad's coming home drunk and hurting her. Now, I've never laid a hand on my wife ever, or my children, thank God. But that dream that I had was a huge wake-up call. I refuse to be that guy. I refuse to be that guy that everyone loves, or everyone loves and gets along with everyone, but then drinks so much and comes home and takes it out on his wife and kids. So I quit drinking when I was 22, and I had to. For me, it was something where I've always loved life. I've always felt the purpose. I use alcohol as an excuse for the fights I would get into and the trouble I would get into. But so I had the vision of my wife apologizing on my behalf, and I was like, I refuse to do that. So I quit drinking, and there's no surprise to me that, in all the years I quit drinking, haven't been in a fight once, haven't been arrested once, and I kind of went real roundabout way to your question about me always having a faith. But yeah, my faith has been something that I was blessed by 2 parents who loved the Lord and instilled that in me. And I think just like any of us, we go from, hey, this is my parents' testimony, and whether I enjoy it or not, I'm brought along to church, to, hey, I'm going to find my own relationship with Christ. And what does that mean to me? And how does that look?
And it might be a tough question for you to answer. It might be an easy one to answer, but a tough one to talk about. What's the biggest thing that you got through only because you had God?
As a father, my greatest fear ever, always, was something happening to one of our children or my wife. So someone, I'll be very, very blatant. Someone taking advantage of my wife or kids, physically. It happened to one of our children. Happened when she was younger. Happened to her through a church leader that had been over our house to dinner. We had been to their house. Obviously, I will not say names. She told us about 2 years after we moved out here, as she was already married with a child. She told us, and it just shattered me. And it happened to her. Let me make this very clear. The tragedy happened to her, but because it's your family member. hardest thing I've ever been through. Hardest, just heartbreaking. But it's such a powerful reminder that even in the darkest days, the sun still rises, and God is still great. And the blessing of her telling us this. Now, I wish, obviously, I wish it never happened. Part of me at first struggling with that was like, God, why are we finding out now? Why not back when it happened, the morning after, or whatever? This gentleman, this guy, lived 15 minutes away from us. And I'm not trying to act tough or whatever, but if I had found out back in New Hampshire, I would have. You can edit this out if you want. I'd be in prison for the rest of my life. I'd be in prison. There's no doubt in my mind. That's not me trying to act tough. It's just finding out years later in California where I would have to sit down, sit at the computer, book a flight, fly out there. It gave me a lot of time to pause and reflect. And who am I going to be as a husband, a father, a grandfather, a teacher, a coach in prison? What's that going to fix? It would fix nothing. It would just cause more pain, more heartache. So the hardest thing I ever went through was a tragedy of a child. Thank God she's thriving today. She still has challenges through that. I shouldn't have said she. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. But I am so proud of the woman she is, the mother she is. Yeah, and without my faith, I have no idea how I would have made it through that. And it has rocked her. So she wants nothing to do with God right now. And I understand that, because I have, it didn't happen to me. It didn't, so I think is to kind of tie this back into, as far as us not being a hammer and just kind of pounding our faith into people. She knows my faith means everything to me. She knows that is what drives me and motivates me and lights me on fire. And I don't need to preach that to her. I just need to live it. I just need to love her and love our grandsons. And will she come around someday? I believe so.
So 2 questions off of that. Because of your faith, and because you stopped drinking at the point you found out, and because you were a different coach, Kurt Hines, at this point, how did you handle it? Obviously, you think you would have been in prison if you found out back then. Yeah. So how did you handle it differently? Obviously not the extreme.
I didn't turn to alcohol.
Yeah.
And I never used alcohol. Some people use it because they're not happy in life. I've always loved life. I just liked the feeling. I liked feeling out of control, and I liked, as naive and as stupid as it sounds, I loved fighting. And I didn't always win. I'm not that tough. I didn't always win. The faith part, though, I mean, if I didn't have this, I don't know. It's one of those things, kind of like, how would you live your life without feet? It's like, well, I've always had feet. I can't imagine, I'd be in a wheelchair, to have prosthetics or whatever. But it's a question. I think it's a great question. But for me, my faith is so much of who I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of who we are. And I think you and I both have that in our lives right now. But for the person that's listening or watching that is suffering something similar, how did you approach the situation in real life? How did you address the man that did it? Obviously you would have beat the guy, just beat the guy to death 15 years ago. Today, you clearly handled it much differently because of the person that God turned you into 15 years later. So how did you handle it? So someone that needs advice right now that's going through something.
Great question. I stopped asking why. I think of my daughter that went through this, how it affected all of us in our family. Obviously, more in particular her. But I also had a cousin who's since passed away, but years ago. He's an older cousin than me. Just a stud in everything in life. Like, we'd get together for family gatherings, and he was just good at everything. He ended up getting into a car accident, became a quadriplegic. After several years of battling with that, he passed away. With both the situation with my daughter and with my cousin John, I stopped asking why, because we most of us, I think, will have a lot of questions that are never answered, and we're gonna meet Jesus someday and go to heaven, and we may or may not know then. But I started asking questions when I'm faced with trials: is what am I supposed to do with this? What can I do to grow from this? What can I do to help bless others with this? I've been accused before of being too transparent with our players. And it's funny, it's never, or very rarely is it from someone on our staff. But I wear my heart on my sleeve in all that I do. And I think it's great because I can share with my players, like, listen, I was that kid that loved high school football, played college football, drank and partied and lived it up. And I didn't get arrested once during the football season, ever. Now, in a high schooler's mind, I thought that's because I'm a great teammate. I won't let my teammates down. I won't let my coaches down. Well, I was putting my parents through hell because when the football season's over, it's like, hey, the reins are off. Let me go out there and be wild and stuff. And it wasn't until years later I realized how distorted that was. I was picking and choosing when I was going to show character and not put people through a hard time. But yeah, it's just, I asked God, what is this? What is this meant for? What am I to do with this?
Did you get an answer? Because that was literally my next question is, and I think it's the most important question that we have to do in life is, how are we using our tragedies as believers to help others? So
Yeah.
did you get that answer?
I believe I did. And I believe I continue to. Honestly, Will, thank you, through gentlemen like you reaching out saying, hey, will you come on my podcast? And most of the podcasts I go on are not faith-based. It's football specific, but almost always somehow it comes up in a question or I will bring it up in part of my answer. I think the answer that I received was, and I'm a firm believer, it didn't happen to you, it happened for you. I think all of life happens for us. And I've posted things like that before, and someone like, well, what about and they'll share tragedies happening. And I'll always respond, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm so sorry, I have no idea what you're going through. Obviously, unless it's something that I can relate with. No idea what you're going through. I just pray for healing. I pray for comfort. And 9 out of 10 times, that individual will reach back out to me through a private message and say, thank you so much for taking the time. And more often than not, they're hurting so much and will share things like that and get blocked by people or deleted, or people will attack them and say, you don't know God then, and start hammering their faith into them, as opposed to just saying, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you if you need something.
And I think when we live life from the standpoint of life happens to me, then I think we take on too much of a victim and
100%.
we can't control, we can't bounce back. And what happened to your daughter, horrible. But even in the worst, even in the worst, and especially in the worst, if it happens to you, it doesn't mean that you can't get over it or you can get over it easily or not. It's still difficult. But when we take it happened to me versus with faith, how can I advance because of this and use this? I think it helps tremendously. And I pray for people that go through something. I went through some stuff when I was looking for a job at one point, and I immediately started praying for the person that was doing what they were doing to me, because I was like, this has nothing to do with me. So you pray for your enemies and you pray for the people, because if you think that they're doing something to you, all of a sudden you're going to get defensive, you're going to become the victim, and you're never going to advance. Yeah,
absolutely. That's still something I'm working on, is praying for the people who are fighting for our demise. And I'm getting better with that slowly. But it is, you mentioned, victim mentalities. Through all of life, are we going to be victims or victors? And we all face trials. We all face tribulations. I had a pastor one time who said something that made the entire congregation laugh a little bit, myself included. And then there was a collective, you're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, that just sunk in. And he said there are 3 stages in life. 1, you are coming out of a storm. 2, you're in the middle of a storm. Or 3, get ready because there's one coming.
Yep.
Oh, I was like, that's kind of a morbid feeling. And that was my first reaction. I was like, that's kind of a depressing thought. And I thought, it's not, it's beautiful, because we have made it through 100% of the storms God has placed before us.
And if you have a faith, you can get, you don't want the next storm to come, but if your prayer, like my prayer is always, Lord, this is what I want. However, I want, just so we're clear, because you're supposed to speak your dreams, your thoughts, and your wants and your desires to God. But I always kind of end it with, but listen, I want it on your time, and I want it if you want it. I want to be part of your plan, and whatever that plan is, I'm good. It's way more hands off the wheel. It's so much easier. Yeah. My first job was in Fargo, North Dakota. I was like, I'm not going to Fargo. And he's like, well, okay, like you're going to Fargo. So then I ended up going there, and I went to Wichita, to Toledo, then Wichita, now to Charlotte. And as soon as I took my hands off the wheel, I was like, all right, now I can at least see why I'm here. Now I can look around a little bit and figure out and learn what I need to learn to get better for the next step. Because thank God I did not come to Charlotte when I wanted to come to a market this size, because I never would have survived this industry, and I would have been laughed out of this industry so quickly because I was so bad.
Right.
So when you take your hands off the wheel and you look at those storms as God's got this, like take that step out of the boat and step on water, don't look down, don't get nervous. It's so much easier. And it's a lot easier said than done. And it comes with years and years and years of practice.
Yeah, and I think I love that. And I think the practice is just living our lives and trusting God and realizing, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Heading into my 26th year of coaching now, I've been blessed to be a part, whether it's a head coach or an assistant, of division championship, league championship, state championships. My greatest year to date still was my first year as a head coach ever. And we lost every game. It sucked. It sucked. It was painful. That, have you ever seen the movie Green Mile, Dead Man Walking?
Yep.
My walk from my truck to the coach's office or to the school every Saturday morning after getting our teeth kicked in was brutal. And I still look back, that was my greatest year of coaching yet. Not the most enjoyable. It sucked. It was horrible. But it was my greatest because it really solidified my why. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to be a head coach? Why? And I always tell people, I have so much respect for all coaches. Well, most of them. For most of them. Being a coach is not easy. Being a head coach is a lot harder. There's a lot more responsibility, a lot more that is upon you, and we sign up for it. But the reason I want to be a head coach is because when I interview people, the first interview I have with them has nothing to do with football. I steer no question I have is about football. Every time they bring to football, I'll answer it quickly and kind of direct the conversation somewhere else. Because I've been blessed to coach with some amazing men. I haven't coached with a woman yet, but would love to. I've been blessed to coach with some amazing men, but I've also coached with men who just use people for their own agenda. They don't care about the players. They'll say the right thing in front of the parents, and then they're completely different behind closed doors or on the field. So when I interview coaches now, I want to get to the heart of the man. I want to know what makes them tick outside of football. And then the second interview, because every coach says the same thing. I want to give back. I want to make a difference. Well, that's great. We all do. But the proverbial crap will hit the fan, whether it's in a practice or a game, whatever it is, and then you see true colors. So when I interview coaches now, the first conversation is just about them, their family, what makes them tick. And then if I have a good vibe there, I'll say, hey, can you come back for a second interview? They're like, absolutely. And I say, great. And I'll walk them down, show them where the weight room is. I said, we're going to meet in the weight room, and we pick a day. And then they'll say, well, what do you want me to do? Like, whatever you want. You can work out with the players. You can just sit back and watch them. Just do what you want. And I usually work out with the players, or the music's loud and I'm yelling and screaming. It's a very electric, atmosphere. But I watch them in the mirror, and I've had coaches say, I just want to give back. I want to reach those kids that really aren't the stars yet, aren't the studs. And I see them walk by every single kid that doesn't fit the mold of a great player and go talk to the big kids or the kids that look athletic. And there were sometimes we're in that middle of that workout, I'm thinking to myself, nope, he's not the guy for us. And then I have had situations where I won't mention the college. I lost two coaches this past year. One got divorced and had to move. His fiance broke off their engagement and he moved back to Connecticut. Both great men, great coaches. So I had to replace two coaches. In the process of looking for two, I interviewed 11, and I was blessed to hire 6. 1 paid, 5 volunteers. Love all 6 of them so far. But there was one gentleman who reached out to me through Twitter. He said, hey, I coach at such and such college. I want to get back to the high school level. And it was the exact position I was looking for. And I was like, all right, God, like, yes, like just this gift handed to me. I met with him for about 45 minutes. That conversation, I just tried to talk about life and getting to know him. Within the first 5 minutes, I thought, nope, this is not the guy for us. He was so self-centered, so about his accomplishments and wins. And every time I get back to what makes you and your wife and whatever, and it was nothing there. Now, he could have been a great football mind, but for me, that doesn't matter. I want to know people I want to coach with people that know the game of football, but first and foremost, know people and love people. Because I think all of the success I've had as a teacher to coach comes down to relationships.
It's a relationship business, and I think life is work, whatever it is. I firmly believe that there is no great coach in any sport that has had long-term success without being in good relationships, without having good relationships. And you see that with the best coaches. And I think it's the most important thing that you can have.
I agree. Yeah.
So what is your purpose? What is your purpose? I mean, surely it's not to win football games, right? I think at a point we learn as Christians, my purpose isn't to have good shows every night. Your purpose isn't to get wins every night on Friday night. You guys play Friday or Saturday?
Fridays.
Yeah. So when did you learn your purpose, and when did it maybe usurp what you may have thought it was to win?
Yeah. My goal is to win. Truly. So the little play on words, my goal is to win as many hearts as I can. And I said this last night, and I get heated up when I say it wasn't a pregame speech. I was addressing parents at a not parent teacher, but a parent information night. And I said, our goal as coaches, I talk about that, what our goal is as coaches, what your goal is as parents, or our responsibility is to bless and empower as many people as we can.
Yeah.
And I told the parents, I said, some of the greatest years I've had coaching, we were 500, which is not impressive in anyone's book, but we had academically eligible student athletes. We had young men and young women who were going through junk in life that we helped walk them through. We had people graduate. My number one purpose in coaching and teaching in life is to bless and empower as many people as I can. And I say this often, and maybe someday I'll make a lot of money, who knows? But right now, I think 90% of our closest friends make more money than we do. But I honestly feel like the richest man alive. It's just every day I wake up, I have the opportunity to, and it's on my heart and it's in my prayers, to bless and empower as many people as I can. And if done correctly, coaching, you're going to win games. You're going to win games, lose games. And I know there are coaches out there who are not fans of mine, and that's okay, because I talk too much about this sort of thing. The fact is, if you're going to have a long career in coaching, you need to win games.
Yeah. It's your job.
Yes. Yeah. It's your job. How do you?
I can't be like, oh, my purpose isn't to have good shows, and then be like, oh, tell my boss it's not my purpose.
Right. and so we've got to win games. How do you do that? Win hearts. With no hidden agenda, with no predetermined, I'm going to win his heart so he can perform better for me. I had a young man, just found out from his mother last night. She showed up to the meeting. I thought, wait a minute, I thought they were moving. I had a young man come to me. He's going to be a sophomore, stud athlete. And he said, Coach, I think we're moving to such and such a town, which is he's a lacrosse player too. I'm like, dang. I said, well, I said,
I can't play baseball. Okay. So
yeah, right. I said, do me a favor. I said, if you go there, play football and lacrosse. Don't ever let someone tell you to play just one. And then 2 days later, came back to practice and he said, Coach, we might be moving to Virginia. I'm like, jeepers, Landon, would you get it straight? And I said, Landon, one thing I said, and I looked at him on the practice field. I said, Landon, I love you. I said, no matter where you go, be great in everything you do. And if you ever need anything, and I thought write him off, he was done. But he heard me say, and I meant it, whatever you need, let me know. And then I found out last night he's staying, which makes me even happier.
That's awesome.
And the reason I share that is because he knows that. I have a young man who's a decent player for us, may or may not ever be a varsity player, and I would never say that to him. But I found out that his father was going through some stuff health-wise. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been texting him every day on the days I don't see him. And yesterday, he's like, Coach, that my family, my dad, thank you so much. It's just unbelievable. And I'm not doing it because he's a stud player. I'm not doing it because I'm not special. It's part of my calling. It's just, if someone's hurting, reach out to them.
You mentioned something that has nothing to do with this, but how bad do you think specialization is in athletics? Because I think it is the absolute worst.
So if you will ever have me on, we could spend an hour or two. I just talked to a parent last night. It wasn't for our student athletes, but 3 young men came with their parents, and 2 of them, they were getting relieved. We finished the parent information section portion of the meeting, getting ready for a boosters meeting. So this gentleman was leaving with his son and the son's friend, who are both going to be freshmen. They look like they're already juniors, and we don't have a lot of big kids. So I was like, dang, what's going on? So I said, hey, before you guys leave, I want to talk to you. So I went outside, talked to him briefly, and they said they're super excited. They've been following me on social media for a while, so they feel like they know who I am. And his father said, hey, so-and-so, he plays lacrosse also, so he won't be able to come to all the way. I said, great.
Good.
He looked at me. I said, great. I said, and I told him, I said, if anyone, I looked at his father, I said, any parent, coach, or personal trainer ever tells you to specialize in one sport, I said, please listen to me. They are ignorant or selfish, and let them choose which one or both. Because I said, how many people can play multiple sports at the high school level and be great? And some of them go on to play multiple sports in college. And I don't care when they choose to specialize, but I always feel it should be their choice. If they're passionate about, I have players, I've had captains who during a homecoming game that it's 14-14 at halftime, and I know this weeks ahead, but aren't going to be here for halftime game planning and my halftime talk, which is not that impressive anyways, because they're in the band or they're in the homecoming corps. Yep. We had during spring ball, we had about 7 of our studs that missed about half of our spring ball practices because they had powder puff practice, which is the girls playing the flag football.
Yeah.
And one of my coaches, I won't say his name, I love him, but he was really bothered by it. I said, Coach, I said, these guys are rock solid. They don't miss a thing during the season. This is part of their high school experience. We're going to let them miss this. And it's the same thing.
Yeah. And some of the greatest baseball players in the world, basketball, football players, whatever it might be, played all the sports. I'll never forget when I worked in Toledo, I was talking to the head trainer of the Toledo Mud Hens AAA baseball. And because this is not just an American thing. In the Dominican, that's all they know is baseball. So that's all they do is baseball. The goal is to get to what's that?
They play baseball in the Dominican?
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard that, but they have a big farm system of guys that come up here and dominate.
Right.
But that's all they do. That's all they've done. And so he had them come up and they were wildly successful and had them do some footwork that wasn't like stringent to baseball. And he said half of them just fell down. It was like they were learning to walk again because all they did was baseball. So there was no side shuffling. There was no whatever the move was. That was a football kind of oriented move or basketball. It just didn't exist. So it's like one of my biggest things is like, kids, play all the sports forever. And because you can only throw so many fastballs in a year before you're never going to throw again anyway. So like you've got to pump the brakes on that stuff, especially the parents.
Yeah. Well, and you can just wave me off and say, hey, let's move on right now. But one more thing that really gets me going, not just the training of our bodies and how we move different ways, which is huge. But I tell our student athletes, listen, if you want to play collegiate, fill in the blank, baseball, football, basketball, soccer, whatever it is, coaches want to know that you are coachable. And if you can take coaching from me and take coaching from the baseball coach and the basketball coach, and we all have different styles, better or worse, doesn't matter. It's going to make you a better human being. And when you graduate high school or college and you have different employers that have different managing styles, it's going to bless you exponentially.
That brings me to one of my favorite topics, and it is the fact that a coach can scream and yell and go after a kid as hard as he wants, as long as there's a relationship there. And I bring this up because we see this every March Madness with Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo gets in some kid's ear, and the broadcasters or Twitter, like, kids are always like, he scream at me like that, I'll knock him out. It's like, dude, they didn't just meet. Like there was 3 years, there was 4 years, there was practice, there was blood, sweat, and tears literally between the two of them. And there's a relationship there. And that's part of why I say it's a relationship business, because you can't coach somebody that doesn't trust you. Like there needs to be some love there. And it's the same way, like I'm newly married. So I'm coachable.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. So I'm coachable by my parents. I've been 30 years. I'm coachable by my coaches when I was playing. Like this is new for me, for my wife. She's like trying to coach me on some certain things. You get a little defensive. You're like, I do not. That's not me. It's not who I am. No, I just ask my mom. My mom says I'm amazing. But you have to build that relationship, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And so the ability to be coached is unparalleled. So how do you build that relationship to where, listen, there's going to be times as a Christian man that you are going to lay into a kid and probably say some things as a Christian not proud of, but it's part of that relationship that you have as a coach.
Yeah. The simple answer is time. I was speaking at a clinic up in LA a few months back, and one of the breakout sessions or afterwards, a coach came up to me and asked a question about culture and how do you build the culture and stuff. And I hadn't even looked down at his hand yet to see if he was wearing a ring. He was. But I said, are you married? He goes, I am. I said, you happily married? He goes, I love my wife. I said, what are the special things you do? And he looked at me. I said, Coach, my point is, I think as coaches, we complicate things with the best of intentions. We think culture has to be this mystical, like I found the hidden, the Holy Grail. Like, how do we do this? It's just, my wife and I are best friends. We've been married for 28 years. Yes, we have date night once a week. Yes, we spend a ton of time together. Yes, we pray together. Yes, we do all these things, but it's just time with each other. As far as with my players, I do yell and scream all the time in the weight room, in the field. It's never derogatory. We have no swearing policies, so the coaches can't swear, the players can't swear, and there are consequences when
different team than I played on in high school.
If they do, yeah. Well, and I've been criticized for that. People say, "Oh, it's football." When I was a head coach,
I don't think you have to swear by any means. Now I respond like it was funny. My brother was the exact opposite. I remember when I was playing receiver when he was like, "Kunkel, no, go out there, don't screw this up."
Yeah,
I got you. And my brother would be like, whoa, why do you think I'm going to screw this up? Just very different.
Yeah. For me, it goes back to that record-setting year, my first year as a head coach, where we lost more than any other team. I kid you not. Well, when you shake hands, baseball, football, after a game, win or lose, everyone walks by and says, Good game.
Good game. Good game.
Don't even lie to us. They'd shake our hands and be like, beautiful field, great stadium. Like, we're that bad, they're not even going to lie to me. But we had a coaches meeting, or I held a coaches meeting a few weeks after our final game of that first year as head coach. And we talked about the X's and O's and what we want to change, the conditioning, the strength and conditioning. And I remember asking our staff, I said, I'm not going to change just for the sake of it. But it's my first year as head coach. We know what our record was, 0-10. What would you have me do differently? Just want to get some honest feedback for some growth. And it was quiet for about 40 seconds, which felt like 40 minutes. And one of my coaches, I'm not small, but this guy's just larger than life. Big dude. He goes, Hines, I don't think the kids respect you. And I looked around and just silent. And no one would make eye contact. And I was like, and I could feel myself getting red. I'm like, all right, what do you mean? He's like, what do you mean? What do I mean? I'm like, give me an example. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, do they talk back? Do they leave the locker room mess, the field a mess? Are they saying things behind my back I'm not aware of? He's like, no, the kids love you. I just don't think they respect you. And I looked at him and he goes, they're not afraid of you. And I talk about the spirit coming over you. I felt such a peace. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I think a head coach should be feared. He goes, I feared my head coaches and they were great. I said, I will never agree with that. I said, if the players fear me, it may look good. Yes, coach, no coach, to an outsider. I said, but when they are suicidal, coming out of the closet, when their girlfriend gets pregnant, when their parents are getting divorced, go through a whole gamut of things that life throws at us. I said, they'll never come to me. I said, I will never want to be a coach that my players fear. He goes, well, I think players should fear their head coach. Now, it's funny.
Fear and respect are very different, by the way.
100%.
Yeah.
And he and I, the first 2 years coaching together, butt heads in a big way a lot. He now has since moved out to California. His wife is from Oceanside. He's one of our best. He and his wife are some of our best friends, and it's amazing the transformation that's happened over the years. But I think you can get on a player if they know you have no agenda, if they know you love them regardless. And one of the things I think really helps with that is it's easy for coaches to pour into and build relationships with the starters.
Mm-hmm.
It's more challenging, it's more time consuming, but I believe it's even more important to build relationships with that second, third, fourth string, or the kid that can't put his helmet on straight or still can't hold a bat his junior year in high school. Because it not only blesses them, but it validates what we preach as coaches all the time about. It's about team. And if I'm going to pour into those studs, I dang well better pour into those young men or young women that aren't studs or may never be studs, because they're human beings just the same.
One of my last questions is, and it's kind of just curiosities, it's mostly for coaches out there that may have had to do this or will have to do this. What do you do? How do you handle when you're called into the AD's office, the principal's office with parents, and they're like, this coach is talking about God around my kid, and I'm tired of it?
Yeah, great question. Hasn't happened yet. Great question. And you know what's funny? I don't think because I share my faith all the time, I don't think I've even thought of that question. And maybe it's naive. Maybe that meeting's just around the corner. I'm
so happy to hear it hasn't, by the way. And I'm also shocked.
Yeah. Now that you asked that question, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. What would I do? I would lose the job if I had to be honest with you. I had a player, I will not say his name, a baseball player, baseball and football player, one of the greatest human beings I've ever coached. Love him. Got into some trouble during the baseball season. Was accused of some things that he is 100% not. Was accused of being racist, and he's just such a great young man. And he's one of those kids that you see in the weight room helping out the struggling players, and before you even ask him to. So fast forward, we had our spring ball. At the end of spring ball, we vote for 2 captains. We announce those at the end of spring ball, and then we'll vote for more captains, 2 or 3 again in August when doubles start. And this young man was nominated as one of the captains. I was thrilled for him because he's been through a lot lately. I got a phone call from my AD just last week, and she said, "Hey, coach," I had her on speakerphone. My assistant head coach is right next to me, and she was like, "Hey, I heard that so and so was nominated captain." And right away, I said, "Robin, I'll die in this hill." I said, he is a captain and he's going to be a captain. And she goes, no, coach. And I was like heated. And she was, no, coach, she said, relax.
Think something.
I said, Robin, I will. I said, but the young man that I know and love should be a captain, is a captain, and I will die on this hill. And the reason I share that is because I don't want my faith to cost my job. But if it does someday, then I'm going to trust God that there's a reason for it. It's not happening to me, before me. I don't try to be secretive about it. Every pregame we go over to a memorial. A young man lost his life from our program well before I got there. But there's a memorial, the end zone of corner of one of our end zones. We go down there. I asked if we could say prayer. The administration said no. I said, can we have a moment of silence? They said yes. So I tell my team all the time. I said, my faith means everything to me, and most of them follow me on social media and see that. I said, we're going to have a moment of silence. I'm going to pray. You guys do what you feel you want to do. It's not a rah, 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 get pumped up for the game moment. Pay respect to the family that lost a child. But I pray with my players individually, often, before games, after games, in the coach's office. And it's something I'll always do.
I think and I was thinking kind of about it while you were talking and while I was asking the question, is I would ask the parent, because so many of these parents, they had like helicopter parents. They're always hovering and they always want to be in control. How does your son feel about it? Has your son ever complained about it? And then maybe let the conversation go from there, let him speak for himself. And then who knows, I hope you never deal with it, but you're a coach for the kid. You're not there for the parents. The parents always want to be involved. I know you are to a degree, but I mean, you're coaching the kid. And
I think now that you said it also, and hopefully it does never come to be, but I would tell them honestly, I use the word I love you all the time to my players, and they understand that the love I have for my wife is different than the love I have for them, than the love I have for steak, but I love steak also. But I tell them I love them all the time. And I had a father 2 years ago, his son was getting in the car after practice. I said, hey, love you, Hudson. And his father just literally was pulling away a little bit. He stopped. He goes, Coach Hines. I said, yeah. And he's a pastor. He's a senior pastor. He goes, I've never heard a coach say that to any of our kids. I said, Robert, I said, appreciate that. And he's had some nice things to say. I said, I say it all the time to the players. And this is the cool thing too. I've never had this. It happened when I was a head coach in New Hampshire, and it happens now in Coronado. And I've never asked the players to do it. But after every workout we have in the weight room or on the field, every practice, every game, every player goes through and shakes hands of every coach. And I love that. We've never asked them to. And I will always kind of shake their hand, pull them in for a hug, and tell them I love them. And I've had players before that kind of look at me like, they don't say it, but kind of like, dude, you're like, what? And then after 2 or 3 years playing for me, they'll try to beat me to it and like, love you, coach. And I love it because it doesn't get said enough and it doesn't get shown enough.
I say that, it's funny. I say it at work all the time. I think some people think I say it as a joke or like trying to be funny, but I always, it's just part of my vernacular. Yeah. Have a good show. I love you. Hey, I love you.
Yeah.
I do say it to get a rise out of people at times, but the point is, I think that we need to say, I love you more, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think it's healthy.
And the reason I share that is I think if it ever does come up with the parents and administration, I would tell them, I love your son and I'm trying to do what's best, what I believe is best for your son. And without being cocky or arrogant, if they ask me to stop, not saying I love you, but if I stop praying with them or whatever, I would, out of respect for them, I would stop doing it with their child, but I wouldn't stop praying for them.
Sure.
There's a difference. They're both powerful, praying with someone and praying for someone.
100%. And then I'd start praying for the parents now they're really in for it. So
exactly.
Last question is, what is one person you want someone to take away from your journey? Someone that's watching and listening to Relatable Journey. What do you want them to have taken away that you've learned from in your journey in life?
That God is always present in our lives. Even when we can't feel him, even when we're mad at him, even if we don't, that's been my greatest prayer lately, is in the craziness of the world and all that's going on, is that God's love will reign in my heart, in my home, and in our world, and reign so much that even people who have denied his existence will acknowledge his presence.
I love it, man. Coach, I appreciate you coming on a Relatable Journey, dude.
Appreciate you, Will. Phil, I know you're still there. Appreciate you. It's a blessing to be connected. So thank you.
Man, that was awesome. I could talk forever between blending sports and faith like that.
Yeah, it is funny. It's go back to the very beginning of our conversation of the imposter syndrome, if you will. It's just I do feel called to be a coach. I feel called, and why? Because it's a platform to change lives. Whether it's talking about grace. One of my favorite quotes, I don't remember where I read it from, but it said, always preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. And I love that, because how many people do we know that dress the part on Sunday? The Bible,
all of us to a degree, I would say.
but don't live it day in and day out. And I'm not putting myself on any pedestal I should never be on, but I do. Pride can be a dangerous thing, but for lack of better words, I take pride in the fact that I am who I claim to be. I am messed up. I'm a sinner. I'm imperfect, but I love Jesus and I love people, and I try to show that in all that I do.
And my pastor had a sermon about this this weekend, actually, and it's the general population. They have a problem with church because the people that go to church are hypocrites. We preach one thing and we do another thing. We say one thing and we do another thing, and hypocrisy will always push people away. And I was talking to my wife. I said, yes, like 100%. We're all guilty of that. But the difference is, me as a Christian, I acknowledge I am a hypocrite. Like, I'm not 100%. I'm never going to be perfect. I preach that we should be like this, but I acknowledge I'm sick, which is why I go to church. So the church is not for people that are perfect. The church is for people that are sick and that know they're sick and that want to get better. Yeah. And they want healing. And only Jesus can do that, because you can't be your own moral compass, because that changes every 5 minutes depending on how you're feeling or what you ate. So if you have that truth and that goalpost never moves and the truth is always truth, then you're going to be okay. And at least you can take solitude in that and trying to get better. And at least you have something to chase.
Yeah. I actually have a quote in my classroom, in my fourth grade classroom. It says, don't aim to be like other Christians, aim to be like Christ. And how often do we do? We judge. Listen, Sunday night, I think, is the NBA finals, right? I think it's Sunday. People are going to either love and praise the Celtics players and staff or hate them, depending on who wins or whatever. And they'll have, even those people that have never played collegiate, let alone professional basketball, will question the play calling and all that stuff. But you can hate a team, but not hate the sport. But with Christianity, it's different. There are so many flawed Christians. And it reminds me of Gandhi's quote, I love your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ, or something like that. And I just think, and what better way for us to just show our transparencies, be transparent, show our insecurities, our weaknesses, our flaws, and say at the same time that in the middle of all my mess, I still love Christ and he still loves me.
I love it. Now, I said I was going to ask the last one, but I want to ask this one as a quick one. Do you think God cares who wins and loses?
You know what's funny? My wife and I talk about it all the time. Yes-ish. Here's the deal. So every Friday morning, my wife, we pray every morning, every night, as I said. Every Friday morning for as long as I've coached, I'm paraphrasing, but I'll say something to the effect of, God, please keep our players safe and don't let anyone get too seriously hurt. And Jill, after like a third or fourth year of marriage, she's like, why do you pray that no one gets seriously hurt? Why not just pray that no one gets hurt? So I said, well, Jill, it's football. I want to hit someone hard enough that they quit and go play tiddlywinks. Within the confines of the game, I want to hurt you enough.
My prayer was always like, let me hit someone hard enough to where they can't finish the game. Like, they're good for next week. Like, they're good in life. Like, they're good on Tuesday. You know what I mean?
Exactly. As far as God caring who wins, I pray for success on Friday night often. And I've had to do a lot of gut checks. Like, am I really praying for this for the right reasons? I don't think God cares if I have championship rings or not, if our team wins or not. The reason I pray for success on the scoreboard is because the more success we have, the more young men we're going to attract to the team, or young women. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I've had in the 25, 26 years I've coached 7 young women I've coached, which is pretty cool. But the more success we have in the world's eyes, the more it's going to attract other people to watch and see what we're doing and join our team, and the more lives we can impact.
Yeah, you're not going to get a lot of attention, at least not in a positive way, if you had a lot of first-year coaching.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a fact.
But I've always said, or at least on this podcast, I've said, I don't think God doesn't care if the 49ers win or the Giants win or the Seahawks win. But I do think that we can't separate God from what we do, that there are individuals that are involved here. Like, there are lives at stake. There are jobs at stake. There are careers on the line. So I do think that he oversees and knows what's happening, and he uses it for good if you are a believer.
Yeah. And how am I showing my faith? I mentioned I'm always amped up, especially during game day. It's a joke about it, but like Thursday nights, man, I'll go to bed around 10 or 11. I'll go to sleep around 2, wake up at 4. It's not cool. I need to get help. And then Friday I come back after the game and I'm up until 2 a.m. breaking down film or whatever. But God provides, in all seriousness, God provides with the energy I need for the rest of the week to do what I do as a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a teacher and coach. But I what was my point with that? As far as the winning,
just how God uses.
Oh, thank you. And I get so amped up, but I think our players and our parents and our families need to see that same Christian man after a win, after a loss.
Yes.
You know? And I need to be that same, hey, I love you guys, I'm proud of you, great effort, or whatever it is, win or lose, and have the players see, all right, coach isn't different. Yeah, there's a bigger smile when we win, but it's the same love in his eyes and the care and attention after a loss. And embrace that, because that's getting back to the struggle I had with my not struggle, the challenge, I don't even know what you want to call it, with what happened to our daughter. But whether it's something as life altering as that, or losing a football game, 2 very different things. They're both opportunities to learn and get better as a football player, as a coach, as a husband, as a father, as a human being. So, yeah.
I love it, Coach. Man, I'll let you go. I thank you again for coming on, man. God bless you. Thank you again for listening to this episode of A Relatable Journey. This is season 2. If you didn't know, there is an entire season 1, so tune into that as well. And if you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, with your family, and of course, we would love 5 stars. We'd love a like. We'd love a subscribe. Whatever you're willing to give to help us out and share the message, we would appreciate that. Thank you again for tuning into A Relatable Journey.